Now I would like to introduce our key guest note speaker, Takashi Ariyoshi, who will be delivering a speech titled Japan's Plans, Priorities, and Preparations 2023. Takashi Ariyoshi is a Deputy Secretary General, G7 Hiroshima Summit Secretariat, Director, Economic Policy Division, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I would like to also reintroduce John Curtin, the Chair, the Director of G7 Research Group.
Hello, bonjour, konnichiwa. I'm Professor John Curtin, the Director of the G7 Research Group based at the University of Toronto in Canada. And it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker for our conference, Mr. Takashi Ariyoshi, the Deputy Secretary General of the G7 Hiroshima Summit Secretariat and Director of the Economic Policy Division in Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Following his university education at Williams College in the United States and the University of Tokyo, Mr. Ariyoshi joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan in 1994. As part of his distinguished career there, he served as the Principal Deputy Director of the Status of U.S. Forces Agreement Division of the North American Affairs Bureau. Then, as First Secretary and subsequently Counselor of the Permanent Delegation of Japan to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. Then as Principal Deputy Director and then Senior Coordinator of the Personnel Division of the Minister's Secretariat in the Ministry. Then Director of the Southwest Asia Division of the Southeast and Southwest Asian Affairs Department. In 2017, he became the director of the Japan-U.S. Security Treaty Division of the North American Affairs Bureau, and then cabinet counselor in charge of the United States, Europe, India, Southeast Asia, and Oceania in the National Security Secretariat. All of the world, almost. In July 2021, he was appointed as the director of the Economic Policy Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Ariyoshi, we are so grateful for you taking time from your exceptionally demanding schedule in preparing the actual Hiroshima Summit to be with us and share with us your thoughts today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for a great introduction. Thank you very much, Suzuki Sensei and Professor Curtin and all other organizers for giving me this precious opportunity. I came here to actually learn from you because you have been studying this issue for such a long time. So it's a great opportunity to me. So. Self-introduction is nicely done by Professor, but actually I have two hats. One is Secretariat. What I do is just prepare as a host, prepare hotels, every setting is done in a nice manner. Director for Economic Bureau, I'm doing the substance. My division is responsible for a Japanese delegation attending the G7 and the G20. So that's what I do, and as there was mentioned in the introduction, in the past I did lots of things of North American affairs and also dealt with India. And Quad was one of the main jobs I did in the National Secretariat. So I have more expertise on these security issues rather than like a health issue or climate change. But anyway, in my current position, I'm doing everything. So I like to touch upon these things. Okay, so this is Hiroshima Summit. And as mentioned here, the Hiroshima summit will take place from 19th to 21st of May. And actually, this is 1 day longer than Hiroshima summit. We will spend 3 days because having a full discussion and also with partners are very important to us. So this is number one, what I want to say. And the second thing is why the summit is taking place in Hiroshima. And before our decision was made, there are lots of actually a few cities that bid for summit, but the war of Ukraine changed everything. So the reason Hiroshima was chosen was actually nicely said by Prime Minister Kishida when President Biden came to Japan. And I don't want to repeat everything, but he said, the world faces an unprecedented challenge caused by Russia's aggression of Ukraine and heightens the risk of use of weapons of mass destruction. At the next year's G7 summit, I hope we can demonstrate the will of the G7 to resolutely reject aggression by force, threat, or nuclear weapons, and attempts to overturn international order with a strength that will make a mark in history. And he says more additional things I don't want to repeat, but Prime Minister Kishida decided with his strong will to hold the G7 summit in Hiroshima. And there are two paragraphs regarding significance of the G7. And one thing, I want to highlight two things. One is the importance of the rule of law and not changing status quo by use of force. Because in domestic politics, rule of law is fairly easy because individuals are treated equally and rule of law is established in constitutions. But in international community, is rule of law established or is it a natural law? Of course, it is written in UN Charter, but it's not self-obvious. And recently, we had, regarding Ukraine aggression, there was a United Nations General Assembly votes, March in 2022, 141 countries in favor, 5 against, and 35 abstention, even in the face of aggression by Russia. So why 35 countries abstaining? So now the fundamental principle of this international order is questioned. So we really want to highlight, this is a fundamental principle, and we will strongly hold it. So this is number one. And the number two, there are some description of many agendas, but this basically says importance of what is called global South. Not only these countries are affected by Ukraine, but by change of geopolitics, these countries are becoming important, but they're suffering from pandemics and also from Ukraine war. So G7 only cannot settle everything. We really need to work closely with the global partners, especially countries called as Global South. So the next page, I want to explain to you what partners will be invited to the G7 summit. And this is announced actually a few days ago. And as you can see, there are countries, mainly countries called Global South. But in addition, we have invited countries who have willingness to play a positive role in protecting international order for peace as well as economics. And also, since this summit is held in Japan as only Asian country in G7 members, we wanted to highlight some importance in the Indo-Pacific region. So those countries, we invited India, Brazil, and some representatives from international organizations like Comoro is a small country, but we really value importance of AU. So even Cook Island is invited because we value Pacific islands and and these regions. So this is how outreach program will be configured in the G7 summit. And next, I want to talk about some priorities of the Japanese presidency. One, of course, first of all, regional issues really important, and Ukraine will continue to be the highest priority agenda. Nearly a year has passed since Russia started its aggression, and it is, as I said, a grave challenge to rule-based international order. But G7 in the past responded in a very united manner, including sanctions to Russia, and we will be continuing to be united and ensure that Ukraine issue will be, I hope, settled. But soon, settling soon may be difficult, but we will put a strong focus on this issue. Another issue is regarding Indo-Pacific region. European countries are, frankly speaking, now very busy with Ukraine. But if you look at the relation with China and Russia, they gradually understand this importance of this region, as well as how to deal with China, would become a very important issue. So the Hiroshima summit will be an opportunity to affirm and strengthen the G7 collaboration on free and open Indo-Pacific. And the second is a nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. As I said before, Prime Minister Kishida has a strong will to place high priorities on this agenda. The G7 will deepen discussions to send a strong message that will advance realistic and practical efforts to link the ideal of a world without nuclear weapons with the reality we face in the harsh security environment. There are lots of ways to tackle this issue, and I briefly point to like a Hiroshima action plan. Prime Minister Kishida mentioned. One is shared recognition on the importance of continuing record of non-use of nuclear weapons. The second, enhancing transparency. 3, maintaining the decreasing trend of a global nuclear stockpile. 4, securing nuclear non-proliferation and promoting peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And 5, encouraging visits to the affected communities by nuclear bombings by international leaders and others. So this is about a nuclear issue. And the third one is economic security. As for economic security, the world has faced disruptions in supply of critical materials and security risks hidden within our critical infrastructure. Vulnerability is lying in our independent economies and have been allowed foreign actors to coercively impose political concessions on others, and such growing risks hidden in our ordinary economic activities pose a threat to the international order based on the rule of law. And German presidency last year affirmed its will, G7's will, to cooperate on the economic security, and it was expressed in the leaders' communique. Hiroshima summit, we would like to work on several issues regarding economic security. One is resilient supply chain, and 2, economic coercion. 3, non-market policy and practices, and 4, malicious practices in the digital space, and 5, resilient critical infrastructure. And 6, critical emerging technology is also important. G7 would like to show its strong will to work together on these agendas. And climate change, this is a really important issue. Although importance of ensuring energy security is reaffirmed in the face of Russia's aggression, our goal to achieve net zero by 2050 based on the Paris Agreement remains unchanged and firm. We believe acceleration of net zero efforts in this critical decade to 2030 is vital so that greenhouse emission will be reduced by 43% by 2030. G7 will show its blueprint for various pathways towards resilient transitions, noting that different and different national and regional circumstances. And also, we would like to call on other emerging emitters countries to make further efforts toward this goal. There may be some pillars on these efforts. One is further implementation of global net zero efforts. The second is support to climate vulnerable people in terms of quality and quantity. And 3, efforts toward achieving net zero by 2050 without compromising energy security. So these are the issues dealt under the climate change. Food security, when it comes to food, given the current food crisis, it is urgently needed to ensure access to affordable, safe, and nutritious food for all and to develop resilient food security. G7 will identify structural vulnerabilities in the global food system and set pathways to overcome them. Many countries have tackled this imminent issue by establishing various fora and initiatives such like Black Sea Grain Initiative and solidarity lanes. G7 will continue to support those efforts and address this issue in several ways. And on health, while social disruption caused by COVID-19 is subsidizing in many advanced economies, but the pandemic is not conquered in a general perspective or global perspective. So at Hiroshima summit, we, based on the lessons learned from the COVID-19, the G7 will show its determination to develop and strengthen better global health architecture, especially for prevention, preparedness, and response, so-called PPR, for future pandemics. And we would like to make constructive inputs to the ongoing initiatives in this regard. In addition, universal health coverage, USC, is an important agenda. The second high-level meeting on UHC will be held in New York in September this year. G7 aims to contribute to achieving more resilient, equitable, and sustainable universal health coverage. And I forgot to mention at the beginning that one of the most important perspective we have is the notion of human security. Because when we discuss about pandemics or health coverage or in the end we need a concerted approach to help people on an individual basis. In the end, each individuals in developed countries as well as developing countries need to be saved. So this is a theme that we will promote throughout various agendas. And on development, there was a question before what Japan would be doing. We want to do a lot of things because development is also an area where we do this human-centered approach for supports vulnerable people left behind. And for example, we need to support achieving SDGs, focusing on vulnerable groups. This will cover like a humanitarian assistance, climate, energy, education, disaster relief, health, gender, digitalization. All the area we need to strengthen our aid efforts. And also another importance is the development finance. Because some of the countries in the past have received a very opaque aid from certain countries, and these aid resulted in non-sustainable debt crisis. I was director for Sri Lanka a few years ago, and Sri Lanka is really suffering from the heavy debt. So we really need to establish a kind of international norm to make the development aid sustainable. So we would like to pursue this kind of efforts in development area. And gender, now in the past, gender issue is done along various areas. Like one is like women and peace and security, another in economic area, and another maybe in social area. But these three are not necessarily connected in a proper way. So we would like to pursue this synergization of efforts so that all the gender problems in conflict area as well as developing countries are settled among the G7 in G7. And finally, on digitalization, there are lots of things. Technical advancement is happening over the world, but we really need to have a kind of a norm standardization or addressing this digital question in a proper way. And we would like to advance like-minded countries to have a successfully lead international efforts, including the promotion of the data free flow with trust, DFFT, based on shared values, such as freedom, democracy. And also, we need to address new issues and address the vacuum of governance, such as the area of metaverse and those new area of digital economy. So I expect that G7 will launch an institutional arrangement for partnerships to increase transparency and interoperability of regulations. So these are many of the agendas we would face at the G7 summit. And finally, I would like to make a few comments because I was listening to discussion before, and if you're looking at what happened after the Ukraine invasion, there are some differences or changes in international governance. If you look at G7 and G20, before the Ukraine crisis, everybody was saying, G7's era is over. G20 is becoming more traction. But is that so? Once this Ukraine crisis happened, G7 showed a very strong unity, upholding fundamental values, implementing strong sanctions, and this results in the today now. So the role of G7 is becoming more and more, I believe, important, and also at the same time, the role of G20 is over because Russia and China are behaving that way. I don't believe so. There are lots of issues that have to be settled through G20, such as health issue. Climate change cannot be settled without participation of G20. So Japan would like to continue work of the G7 as well as G20, but the expertise and it will be different depending on what international organizations or groups you're talking about. And yes, Professor said G7 should be meeting more often. Yes, we are meeting very often using VTC. Nowadays, my division has to prepare a VTC in a week time or less than a week time for prime ministerial leaders G7. Last time, Kishida-san went to Belgium to have G7 physical meeting, and it's an irregular one. I was told that Kishida-san will be going to Belgium almost like 5 or 6 days before he really goes. So, but it was successful and it could be done. So we will take your advice to strengthen G7 as a forum. And another thing I want to say right now is that there was a discussion, is talk shop meaningful? Is just leaders talk meaningful? There are two answers to this. Talking at the leaders level, of course, it is useful. But also, I really want to highlight to you that before the summit meeting, we do lots of preparation, making communiques. Preparation of a communique is done in working groups, Sherpa meetings, sub-Sherpa meetings. By drafting this document, lots of discussion will happen. It sparks discussion among governments in Japan, government in UK, and government inside the EU Commission, and then new questions arise. We settle. And then gradually, these results will be brought up to the summit level. And then at the summit level, leaders really talk, how can we advance this issue more or not? So I really like to highlight the importance of talking, not only the leaders level, but this summit will spark, discussion among our bureaucrats and bureaucratic machineries. So this is most of the thing I want to say at the beginning. Maybe I'm speaking 13 minutes too long, but I'd rather take questions from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderfully comprehensive and detailed outline of Japan's agenda aspirations for the Hiroshima summit, and your very frank and indeed wise comments on the main suggestions that were offered in the first half day of the morning of our conference. We have time for a few questions, so who would like to lead off? Yes, please.
Thank you so much, sir. You mentioned human security, and I wanted to highlight for the audience the leadership that Japan has played in forming the Human Security Trust at the United Nations. I believe strongly that the failure to make human security a central theme in the international order is one of the reasons that we have been unable to get beyond national militarism and maturely deal with the pandemic as a global human security threat, the necessity of the health of the oceans as a global human security threat, the climate, and so many other issues that can't be dealt with at a national level. And I was hoping that this great change that our planet must take to see the human family as the central theme will emerge from the Hiroshima summit because Japan of any nation has the moral authority to lead on that issue because you have walked the talk.
Thank you very much. Is this the concept of human security and human-centered approach is really important. So I think recently there was a UNDP report, and it highlighted the importance of solidarity incorporating. So solidarity means not only just doing protection and empowerment, but the coordinated efforts is required. And the G7 is the right venue to address this issue. So especially it relates to in the area of like health or climate change and development. While we address these issues, we will take on this human-centered approach, and I would like to promote the idea of human security.
Thank you. Over here. Yes, you, sir.
Ariyoshi-san, thank you very much for a really interesting lecture. I'm wondering if you could share your views of how Japan, as the host for the G7 this year, understands the role of South Korea, India, Cameroon, which Pacific island, I forgot. But what is the role of bringing them to the summit? How do you see translating their presence into practical policy? Thank you very much.
India is obviously the G20 presidency. So we would like to keep a very close coordination with G7 and G20. Even like, as I said, I went to G20 foreign ministerial. So G20 process has already begun. And so we, when we will have the Hiroshima summit, G7 will of course discuss many issues, including Ukraine or health issue, everything. But having this India as a G20 chair, it would be vital so that the G20 summit in Delhi would build on the efforts of the G7 and make a very tangible progress. Korea is also important partner. Korea is not just the chair of any international bodies or groups, but Korea has recently shown that it would play a role in advancing free and open Indo-Pacific, and it has a responsibility, and it has a will and the responsibility to uphold international order. So that is one of the reasons we decided to invite Korea. So since the free and open Indo-Pacific is one of the important agenda of the G7, having Korea in it is really, we can expect synergy, and also we can have Korean involvement in future efforts to achieve peace and stability in this region.
Sir, yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Nobuyuki Asai from Soka International. So thank you for the presentation. So nowadays, so many problems are emerging. So we need much more money to solve all the problems. So we ourselves are mildly committed to an initiative for realization of the international solidarity levy, so 국사의 렌탈대. And it would not be the only solution, but I wonder how G7 summit will address the issue of finance.
I think finance is dealt in different areas. So, frankly speaking, there is health issue, climate change issue, and each issue is dealt in a different way. But if I take an example of climate change, we have already committed. This is how do you call it, the climate fund. And the second commitment is, being has to be discussed. So of course, G7 will be preparing for how we should address the issue, and then, but to deal with all of this issue, we not only mobilize our own resources, but also asking our other partners, like some of the emerging countries will be able to also play their roles. So of course, G7 will show what we can first, but we think mobilizing other resources are also important. So we will do these kind of efforts in each of the area, like climate change and health, and so that is a way we are thinking about, ensuring the financing. Right?
We also have a question about mental health, which has probably touched the lives of everyone in this room and beyond. We do know that Japan has been uniquely a leader in the G7 and the G20 in the agenda advancing progress on mental health for the age of dementia, Alzheimer's, but now, of course, in the age of COVID, mental health a major concern for young people and everyone in between. Can we expect Japan's leadership on mental health for the aging and now for the young to continue at Hiroshima?
Yes, I actually, I forgot to show the maybe last slide. Where is it? Yeah. So actually, we are having not 14. Actually, we have one more ministerial. So now we have 15 ministerials, and for each agendas, like the one you mentioned regarding mental disease and dementia, I hope that health ministry meeting is done in Nagasaki first. So frankly, I'm not so covering about details of each discussion in each ministerial, but I really hope that this discussion is first done in Nagasaki, and all these discussions, will join the summit in the end. So please do understand, summit is important because it will spark discussion among the ministries. If there is a summit, health ministers will meet. When health ministers will meet, all these, specialists dealing on specific issues will join their wisdom and need for action together. And then it will become health ministries communique, I hope. And then the difficult part will be brought to the summit. So, and the summit leaders will discuss the most important issues, the most difficult ones. So that's how, the way G7 works, and that's why it is important. It's like, having PhD without dissertation is nothing, right? You need to have a dissertation, but through this, through the process, you learn many things, you research many things, and then you discuss with professors, you do, that's important. So this is why communicate is important.
Well, thank you very much for underscoring, inter alia, the value of getting those dissertations done. Yes, a question up here.
Hello, my name is Ashima and I'm from India. Thank you so much for sharing the priorities of Japan at the summit. And thinking about all the priorities that you shared, I was encouraged to see that gender will be discussed through the synergization of efforts. And I was wondering if you could share more about that, because gender is such is a topic that needs to be discussed through an intersectional lens. And since the establishment of the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council in 2018, I wonder how it will be prioritized in this summit, and what are some of the discussions we could look forward to, and possibly policies that will come out of this summit.
Yes, like as I introduced, the primary concerns of gender issue, what we are doing through G7 is we really see the problem of a gender issue or women suffering from in conflict areas and so forth. And but in the past, this women peace security is done only among those people there, and but it's apart from economic, women's participation in economy and so forth. So we are advancing efforts called Nexus, meaning it will connect these peace efforts and economic efforts and social efforts and so forth. And so these are main, we want to, the main areas we want to progress on the development area. But also we are having gender ministers meeting in Nikko. So we, at that ministerial, lots of discussion will be done on other issues for regarding gender issues. And then it will be brought to the summit as well. So I'm glad that we are having this gender, equality ministers meeting as a part of ministerial meetings. Thank you.
Yes, question over here.
Thank you. I am wondering if you could expand a little on the plans on climate change, in particular with relation to ending fossil fuel subsidies, an issue that's been on the agenda for many years that we're still looking for progress on.
Okay. As I said, we see everybody is fearing, this Ukraine crisis would slow our efforts to climate change or fossil fuel and so forth. And the most difficult part is developing countries are, say, energy prices too high and the green transition expensive and so forth. We need to keep the goal while allowing alternatives for developing countries. So in Elmar, JET-P program was announced, and in our case, we are doing with Indonesians to help give some alternatives. And recently, our METI issued Asia Zero Emission Community idea. So we would like to promote this kind of alternative so that this fossil fuel energy dependence could be reduced and phased out in an appropriate manner. So your question is, okay, I understand what you say. So what's new? So I think that's your question, right? And I have to tell that this prep process is still ongoing. So I cannot say this is the answer now. But today, I really want you to understand Japan and G7, all of the members are really serious that this Ukraine crisis will not slow our climate goals and commitments. So, and we do this not only with G7 fora, but also we do with G20 partners. India is very important in this issue. So let's see.
Sadly, our time has come to an end, but in fine G7 fashion, we can stop the clock for one more question.
Actually, from the beginning, we are hearing the balancing role of Japan. And I personally think it's really good because when we talk about sustainability or security issues, nowadays, all the excluding things actually becoming more and more visible. That's why the crisis also, we think it's very much crisis. And in terms of the Ukraine war also. And in all that case, also, I found that Japan has a very specific position in terms of trust between the relation when we talk about developed country and developing countries, or North and the South. whatever. So is there any specific role? I mean, we know that you are already incorporating some developing countries and many other cases. Any other specific things that really can show that balancing role of Japan? Because it's a matter of the trust and how it really can enhance that kind of things. Thank you.
You know, frankly, like when I went to the G20 in India, you know, Russia, Europeans, you know, start fighting. Of course, you know, we cannot admit Russia's aggression. So, but this is not, you know, Western Europe, and it isn't a question between Western Europe and Russia. It's as I said, this is a question of fundamental principles of international law. Of course, so Japan, I raise a flag. Japan says the view, and we are not. We are telling to them this is, you know, fundamental issue. We are united not only with these, you know, Western countries, but we closely discuss with India, Brazil, Indonesia. And also, like after the crisis, we talked to the ASEAN countries. Look, you know, this cannot be tolerated. So we played our role, and please believe, you know, G20 is not. It's like in case of Ukraine, we had a G20 foreign ministerial meeting in March. There was no joint communique because of the Ukraine issues. But the Indian presidency really did a good job. You know, they really wanted this outcome. So, okay, if Russia, China couldn't agree to paragraph 3 and paragraph 4, be it. But India pushes really hard that, you know, agree to all other paragraphs so that G20 can still cooperate on economic issues. On paragraph 3, paragraph 4, it relates to, they relate to Ukraine. India did a very good job. Who do not subscribe to this paragraph? And then China and Russia didn't subscribe to. But all others subscribed to the Bali language, which we adopted in November. So in the process, Japan as G7 chair, we not only talked among G7 members, we talked with India, we talked with G20 troikas, and gathered all these forces together so that the G20 becomes a unified, you know, fora. And so it's not, you know, 2 versus 10 versus 8. The Ukraine para was 2 versus 18. So that role is important, and I think the same thing will continue to happen until the Delhi summit in this fall.
Okay, Mr. Ariyoshi, thank you so much for your magnificent contribution to our dialogue, and we hope that we can in some small way repair you by generating recommendations which you, your colleagues, and your leaders may find useful at Hiroshima. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Okay.